Commander Leah Stroud had seen war before, but nothing like this. The sky above Earth split open, bleeding plasma as the Sorak Dominion descended without warning. Their ships weren't sleek or beautiful. They were monstrous, jagged things designed for one purpose: eradication. Black monoliths carved from living alloys. Silent, relentless. Gods of extinction. Leah stood on the deck of the Solstice Vanguard, Earth's last orbital defense command. The stars had vanished behind the Sorak swarm. All defense grids. Fire. "Everything!" she snapped. Missile banks launched. Orbital cannons lit the void. Swarms of drones dove at impossible speeds. The Sorak barely flinched. Their front line opened with a single pulse. One beam, the width of a continent, carved through orbital stations and cities in a single breath. Beijing vanished. Cape Town burned. Chicago crumbled into radioactive glass. On the comms, screaming. Static. Gone. Leah's fingers trembled against the console. This wasn't an invasion. It was execution. Earth's defenses collapsed within 12 minutes. The Solstice Vanguard took a glancing hit, just a warning, the Sorak seemed to say, enough to fry half its systems and send it spiraling. Inside, lights flickered. Metal shrieked. Stroud pulled herself up from the floor, bleeding from her scalp. Smoke filled the air. "Status!" she barked. A young ensign, barely 20, replied, "We've lost contact with the Moon, Mars, and Europa Command. Earth's atmosphere is igniting." "Ma'am, this is extinction." Leah's voice was iron. "Then we get as many people out as we can. In orbit." The last human colony ships launched in desperation. Arkship Horizon Dawn led the evacuation, carrying a mix of scientists, engineers, soldiers, and terrified families. It wasn't enough. Not by 100 million. Most would never leave the surface. Stroud watched from the command deck as entire cities tried to escape to launch pads already turned to rubble. Fathers carrying children, mothers clutching old-world relics, soldiers forming lines that would never hold. Humanity's last act on Earth wasn't defiance. It was grief. The Sorak leader, identified only as Over-Sovereign Veril Thas, broadcast one message, translated through hijacked human satellites. "Your species is inefficient, emotionally corrosive, a failed variant of sapience. You will not be allowed to replicate further." Leah stared at the transmission. "Tell that to the stars, you bastard." The Solstice Vanguard, burning and half dead, used its last power to ram into the Sorak warship nearest the evac corridor. The explosion gave just enough of a distraction. The Horizon Dawn and 3 other Ark ships slipped into FTL. Only 4, out of over 1,000 planned. 2 weeks later, Leah woke aboard the Horizon Dawn. Her ribs were cracked, her right arm in a brace, but she was alive. She walked through the ship's lower decks, makeshift refugee shelters now. Children huddled under emergency blankets, soldiers sharpening knives that wouldn't matter. The smell of burned air recyclers still lingered. She passed by a cracked viewport. Earth hung in the distance, or what was left of it. A burning corpse, molten and lifeless. Her home was gone. She didn't cry. Not yet. She made her way to the bridge and opened a secure channel to surviving captains. "Listen up," she said. "We're not rebuilding. We're not running. We survived. And the Sorak made a mistake." She leaned into the mic. "They let us live." Somewhere deep in Sorak space, a minor war analyst flagged a report. 4 human vessels escaped extinction event. Probability of significant threat, 0.003%. The note was dismissed and buried. It would be the last underestimation the Dominion ever made. 5 years after the fall, humanity was a rumor. The Sorak believed they'd finished the job. Systems once home to billions were now glassed, drifting with debris. No official report ever acknowledged the handful of Ark ships that vanished into the black. The Dominion had moved on, but the humans hadn't. They were scattered, across dead moons, forgotten mining colonies, pirate rings, and under the floorboards of the galaxy. They didn't rebuild Earth. They did something worse. They adapted. The Horizon Dawn limped into orbit over a rogue planetoid in the Dust Reach, Sector 19K, well outside Dominion patrols. The atmosphere was barely breathable, gravity unstable. Perfect. Commander Leah Stroud stood before the survivors on a wind-swept plateau, a makeshift camp rising behind her, tarps, engines, and scavenged solar sails stitched into a livable home. They had no government, no flag. Only memory. "This isn't a grave," she said. "It's a forge." Beside her stood Colonel Rise Makar, a former Earth Marine. He crossed his arms, scanning the crowd. No medals, no uniforms, just people who want payback. The crowd, engineers, ex-soldiers, orphans, exiles, raised fists in silent agreement. Leah finished, "We don't rebuild the past. We build the weapon that buries theirs." They called themselves the Fury-born Accord, a broken species with no nation, no command structure, just a cause. And they got to work. They traded scrap with outlaw smugglers, stole fuel from abandoned research stations, and rewired black market AI cores. The Dominion hadn't wiped out every alien race, just the ones that resisted. The others, enslaved, cowed, hunted, watched the fury born from the shadows. Some began to whisper, "The humans fight back." In the cratered belly of a forgotten moon, Leah discovered their edge. The structure was buried beneath kilometers of rock. Alien, but not Sorak. Its halls pulsed with dormant energy, like arteries waiting to wake. Leah, Makar, and a linguist named Ari Trell broke the seal. Inside, they found it, a warship, a behemoth built from obsidian alloys, shaped like a predator's tooth. Strange glyphs pulsed down its spine, some kind of living circuitry. The ship was dead, but waiting. "Not built by the Sorak," Ari whispered. "No known species built this. It's older." They named it the Ravager's Wake. It took 2 years and 5 engineers dying from neural overload before the Furyborn cracked its systems. The ship's AI had to be hardwired through a human brain to function, and only one survived it. Trell became the voice of the ship, the interface, and his eyes never looked entirely human again. "She doesn't like the Sorak," he said, blinking with twin pupils. "She remembers them. The Ravager's Wake wasn't just a ship. It was a relic from a forgotten war, one where the Sorak weren't the victors." Leah stood before its control core, hand on the flickering glyphs. "You hate them too, huh?" A pulse of energy ran through the deck like a growl. Now, with a flagship and a goal, the Furyborn began to strike back, small at first, raids on patrol convoys, sabotaging comm relays, jamming hyperlanes. The Sorak believed it was piracy, rogue elements, nothing serious, until one of their refineries in the Vel Crucis belt exploded from within, every worker freed, every Sorak officer executed. A symbol was burned into the steel, a human skull. Split by a star, the Furyborn were done hiding. In a Dominion war chamber, a Sorak strategist paused over a report. Rebel activity in the Dust Reach escalating. High probability of human origin. Recommend reassessment. The request was denied. Leah Stroud watched the stars from the Ravager's bridge. "We start with the systems they stole from us, but that's just the beginning." Makar grinned beside her. "How far are we taking this?" She didn't hesitate. "Every star they own." Kale's Reach was more fortress than system, an industrial powerhouse with 3 orbital shipyards, 2 defense moons, and a star forge churning out Dominion warships day and night. It fed entire Sorak fleets, untouchable, unchallenged for over a century, until the humans came back. Leah Stroud stood in the command well of the Ravager's Wake, her eyes locked on the holographic projection of Kale's Reach. It pulsed with red, alert networks. Minefields. Automated rail batteries. We hit the power nodes on moons KL-1 and KL-2 first, she said. Then we shut down the defense grid and drop our payload on the Starforge. Colonel Makar glanced at the readout. That defense grid is rigged to fry anything that moves faster than a rock, Leah smirked. Then we move like a rock. The plan was madness. But that's what the Sorak never planned for. Desperation. The Furyborn had grown. Scattered refugee cells had become strike wings. Engineers had refitted mining haulers into stealth torpedo platforms. They called them dust serpents, slow, silent, and deadly. And for Kale's Reach, they had something special, a new kind of weapon built from reverse-engineered Sorak graviton cores. Grav bomb lances, projectiles that turned metal into molten plasma on impact and warped surrounding time for seconds. Illegal, unstable, perfect. The first strike came from within. Furyborn operatives had infiltrated KL-1 6 months prior, posing as laborers. On Leah's signal, they sabotaged the internal fusion stabilizers, triggering controlled overloads. The moon cracked in two. The Sorak barely had time to respond before the Ravager's wake dropped from subspace inside the outer defense ring, ripping through a Sorak carrier with its primary spinal beam. Trell's voice echoed through the ship. Their language doesn't have a word for surprise anymore. Let's remind them. KL-2's automated defenses scrambled, but the Furyborn had already jammed the signal chain. From the moon's surface, Furyborn assault teams emerged from camouflaged impact pods. They moved like ghosts, disabling weapon clusters, planting charges, dragging shocked Sorak overseers out of their bunkers. One rebel, former janitor, now combat engineer, looked up at a Dominion flag and said, "You made me clean blood off walls for 5 years. Time for payback." He detonated the core. Meanwhile, Makar led the dust serpents in a silent crawl toward the Starforge. Each one mimicked asteroid debris, using old mining field drift to slip inside the defense net. The Sorak didn't notice them until they were already within the forge's thermal shielding. By then, the first lance had fired. A white-hot spike tore through the foundry's core, rupturing fusion lines. Hundreds of Sorak workers, slave laborers, alien technicians, young officers screamed as the heart of Kale's Reach began to melt. The forge shuddered. Then it detonated. The Furyborn didn't stay to celebrate. Leah's order was clear. Hit. Bleed. Vanish. As the Ravager's wake turned and blinked out of Kale's orbit, the system fell into chaos. Communications failed. Supply lines ruptured. Kale's Reach had never been attacked before. No one had ever dared. Now it was burning, and behind it, the Furyborn left only a message, broadcast across Sorak-controlled space in every hacked frequency, every visual codec. We are still here. We are coming for all of it. This is your first loss. It won't be the last. At Dominion Central Command, the overseers reviewed the carnage with clinical precision. For the first time in centuries, a red line appeared in their logs. Human threat status, escalated. Probability of full insurgency, 71.2%. Probability of Dominion system loss, 37.9%. Over-Sovereign Verul Tas viewed the report. He leaned forward slowly, mandibles twitching. Begin purging outer sectors. If one human breathes in our space, we kill the planet beneath them. Back aboard. The Ravager's wake. Leah watched Kale's Reach shrink into the stars. It's not about revenge anymore, she said quietly. Makar glanced sideways. No, she said. It's about fear. We're going to make them feel what we did, system by system. And for the first time since Earth's fall, the galaxy felt the tremble of human vengeance. Halveth Prime was a jewel in the Dominion's crown, a Sorak pleasure world carved from the ruins of a colonized civilization. Its twin moons shimmered with climate-controlled gardens, and its atmosphere was filtered so that every breath tasted like nectar. And underneath it all, thousands of slaves toiled in silence, remnants of conquered species, broken and discarded. That was about to change. Leah Stroud surveyed the system from the Ravager's wake, hands clasped behind her back. No shipyards, minimal defense grid, civilian infrastructure only, reported Trell. His voice still carried an odd harmonic echo, ever since he'd synced fully with the ship's alien AI. "Why strike it?" Makar asked. "It's not a tactical target." Leah turned to him, face stone hard. "Because they made it out of our bones." He looked at the scan again. Beneath the crystal towers and golden seas, the sensor grid revealed something ugly. Mass-holding cells, execution pits, and entire districts sealed for labor processing. "Another Eden built on genocide," he muttered. Leah nodded. "We're not just soldiers. We're a reckoning." The Furyborn dropped into the system under silent warp, using the gravitational shadow of Halveth's smaller moon to mask their arrival. Stealth pods launched from the Ravager's wake, slicing through the atmosphere in near-total silence. Each pod carried a strike team, not just human. Alien volunteers now fighting under the Furyborn Accord, survivors of what the Sorak called cleansings. One team, led by former Resistance leader Soraya Vex, landed in Halveth's central administrative district. She stepped from the pod, cloaked in shadow, her plasma rifle humming faintly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silent streets ahead of her would burn. Simultaneously, Furyborn hackers embedded within the orbital trade network triggered a cascading failure in the planetary defense AI. At the same moment, thousands of collars around slave workers deactivated. One by one, the oppressed looked up, and for the first time in years, they were free. The city burned from the inside out. Former slaves seized abandoned guard posts. Furyborn agents overloaded gravity towers, sending sections of the gilded skyline crashing into the sea. Elite Sorak security forces responded swiftly and were cut down even faster. The Furyborn had brought newer weapons now, pulse rail scatter rifles, stolen neural disruptors, and anti-armor drones built from Sorak recon scraps. For every blow the Dominion had struck against Earth and its colonies, a new weapon had been born from its wreckage. Leah descended personally with the command squad. They took the palace, what used to be the central cultural hall of the Zenthari people, before the Sorak made it into a spa resort. She kicked open the doors, stepping over Sorak nobles who had never imagined their blood would spill like anyone else's. Makar placed the Furyborn banner atop the spire, a black star split by red wings. The slaves, no, the liberated, cheered as it rose. But victory came with a cost. The Dominion response was swift and brutal. 37 hours after the assault began, 2 Sorak dreadnoughts emerged from warp and began atmospheric bombardment. Entire sectors of the planet were wiped clean in retaliation. Not by the Furyborn, but by the Sorak themselves. They would rather glass their own jewel than let humans take it. Trell screamed in the command chamber as the Ravager's wake tried to override the bombardment, his body convulsing from the psychic feedback of the ship's ancient AI. "We can't stop it," he gasped. "They're purging the whole planet." Leah had a choice: stay and die, or retreat with the thousands they had evacuated. She made the call. As the wake rose into orbit, Halveth Prime collapsed behind them, fire consuming paradise. From orbit, the survivors wept, and Leah stood silent. "We saved what we could," Makar said. She nodded, jaw tight. "And next time, we don't give them the option to scorch it behind us." In a hidden Dominion command chamber, Verul Thas stared at the footage. His claws tapped the floor in rage. "They burn our worlds now," he said. A subordinate shivered. "Their species adapts with hostility, Sovereign. They are evolving through trauma." Verelthas snarled. Then we will give them extinction. Again. But deep in the stars, the Fury-born accord had grown, and now other species were watching, some in awe, some in fear, but more and more were daring to ask, what if the humans win? The aftermath of Halveth Prime rippled through the galaxy like a blade slicing old treaties apart. Worlds that had once turned blind eyes now stared in disbelief. The humans hadn't just struck back. They'd torn out the heart of one of the Dominion's most treasured symbols and lived to tell the tale. The Fury-born accord was no longer a footnote. They were an uprising. In the hidden asteroid base of Drifthold, Leah Stroud stood before a gathering that hadn't happened in generations. Representatives of species once broken, scattered, or too afraid to rise. The Scaran, wiry insectoids, with burn scars from Dominion acid mines. The Therics, amphibious tacticians whose cities were glassed during the cleansing of Blue Rim. Even the Vexari, once Dominion collaborators, now turned traitor after Halveth's destruction, claimed their... Leah didn't shout. She didn't plead. She just told the truth. We aren't asking you to die for us. We're showing you how to make them bleed. The room was silent. Then Scaran speaker Vuj tilted her segmented head. You are human. You were supposed to die. Out with your planet. Now you burn theirs. Leah met her gaze. We're very bad at dying quietly. The Fury-born grew from a rogue cell into a true alliance. They weren't just humans anymore. They were broken things, welded together by fire. Makar trained Therics shock troops in guerrilla tactics, while ex-engineers like Soraya Vex repurposed stolen Dominion drones into swarms of mobile sabotage units. Each new world the Fury-born visited added something. A stealth drive here, an ancient torpedo cache there, a forgotten language with access, codes long thought lost. Knowledge became their most dangerous weapon, and vengeance, their fuel. In a hidden Dominion black site, a captured Scaran technician whispered his last breath. They don't want territory. They want you to remember what fear feels like. He was executed, but his message had already spread. Meanwhile, Trell grew stranger. Ever since the Ravager's wake had fully bonded with him, his thoughts slipped between languages, timelines, even realities. He began speaking of war plans from battles no one remembered and weapon systems no one had built. At first, the crew feared he was breaking. Then he started predicting Dominion fleet movements before they happened. This ship was built by something older than the Sorak, he told Leah one night. Something they feared. I think we were meant to find it. She studied him carefully. Are you saying we're part of its plan? No, he said with a half-smile. I think it's part of ours now. With each strike, the Fury-born expanded their reach, raiding supply convoys, jamming hypergates, and disrupting Dominion planetary networks. They didn't always win, but they always left a mark. One Sorak admiral committed suicide after losing. 3 sectors to Fury-born raids. A military research moon detonated when Theric saboteurs turned their own void cannons inward. Across the stars, a new whisper haunted Dominion outposts. The stars belonged to the broken now, but not all was victory. On Yethros Station, Fury-born operatives walked into a trap. Dominion overseer Varl Zhen had anticipated their movements, capturing dozens of resistance leaders in a plasma ring snare. Their screams were broadcast system-wide. It was a warning, but the Fury-born made it a rallying cry. Hours later, they hijacked the same transmission and overlaid it with a message. You. Want us to fear what you did? We remember what you did. And for every scream you cause, we'll silence another system. Back in Drifthold, Leah stood with her new coalition. Maps glowed around them. Sector after sector was going dark under Fury-born raids. We have allies. Now, Makar said, voice low. Real ones. She nodded. Not enough. Then we make more. Trell entered the chamber, eyes glowing faintly. I know where we go next, he said. They turned. The Dominion has a graveyard, a vault of what they took, what they feared, what they buried. Leah raised an eyebrow. You found it? Trell smiled. No, it found us. And far away, deep in forgotten space, something old began to wake. Not human, not Sorak, but very, very angry. The coordinates Trell had spoken in dreams were buried deep, encrypted in an ancient Sorak dialect spoken during the First Dominion conquest. They led to a dead system at the edge of known space. No starlight, no orbiting worlds. Just the scattered wreckage of wars too old for history books. And at the center, a structure unlike any the Furyborn had seen. They called it the Vault. The Ravager's wake approached cautiously, its shadow gliding. Across debris fields littered with ruined Sorak hulls and long-dead battleships belonging to species long extinct. Trell stood silent at the helm. His eyes flickered with unreadable symbols. I don't think we're the first to try opening it, Makar muttered, watching twisted wrecks drift past. We'll be the first to survive it, Leah said, stepping forward. The vault was a black sphere 1,000 kilometers wide, etched with moving glyphs that shimmered like starlight trapped in glass. No doors, no heat, no energy signature, yet it pulsed with awareness. Watching. Trell reached out with his mind. The Ravager's wake responded. Its AI core merged with the vault's outer glyphs, feeding pulses of human memories into alien code. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a voice filled the ship. Not a sound, but a pressure in their bones. You are the broken flame, bearers of vengeance. The cycle twists once more. The vault opened. Inside was a space that should not have existed, impossible corridors bent in every direction. Time blurred. Gravity shifted. History whispered from every wall. Weapons floated in stasis. Rifles forged from neutronium. Armor, wrapped in Event Horizon fabric. Ships no bigger than a man's hand, but with the firepower of a dreadnought. It wasn't a vault. It was a tomb for the Dominion's greatest fears. Leah walked among the relics, heart pounding. This is where they buried what they couldn't control, she whispered. Technology, cultures, gods. Makar picked up a blade humming with invisible frequencies. They didn't destroy them. They stored them. For later, Trell said. For when even they feared extinction. And now, the Furyborn had the keys. The team emerged from the vault changed. They carried weapons the Sorak had outlawed millennia ago. Armor that shifted to match threats. Star maps from before the Dominion's rise. Most importantly, they carried knowledge, not just of Sorak tactics, but of how the Dominion began. The truth. It hadn't been a rise to power. It had been a theft. The Sorak hadn't conquered their way across the stars. They'd scavenged every fallen civilization, stripped their knowledge, enslaved their survivors, and rewritten history. They didn't build the Dominion, Leah said in disbelief. They looted it from 1,000 dead empires, Makar growled. Then it's time they joined them. The Furyborn returned to Drifthold changed. Word spread quickly through the Alliance. Humanity had unearthed the vault, and they were giving its secrets to the galaxy. Rebellions reignited across Dominion space. Weapons appeared where none should exist. Fleets born from memory and hate began to rise. Entire species once cowed into submission now fought back, not with fear, but with hope, and the Sorak began to fracture. At Dominion Central Command, Over-Sovereign Verulthas felt the tremors. Their ancestral weapon codes were being used against them. Outposts that had stood for generations were crumbling in days. A single encrypted message reached. his throne bouncing through hacked channels and corrupted satellites. "We found what you feared, and we're sharing it with everyone." Verulthas rose slowly. "Summon the High Dominion. Activate Protocol Omega. If we are to die, we burn everything with us." Back aboard the Ravager's wake, Leah stared into the stars. Her hands rested on a vault-forged command interface that responded to her thoughts before she spoke. "What's our next target?" Makar asked. Leah's eyes glowed faintly with new understanding. "The one place the Dominion thinks we'll never reach." He frowned. "You mean?" She nodded. "The core worlds. We end it where it began." And as the Fury-born fleet gathered, behind her, humans, Thariks, Skaran, Vexari, and more, the stars pulsed with fire and rebellion. The end game had begun. The Dominion's core worlds were myth in most rebel circles, spoken of in hushed tones like titans asleep behind iron walls. No one attacked them. No one even found them. They existed beyond standard warp lanes, shielded by time-folding fortresses, and quantum lock chains older than memory, but the Fury-born had the vault, and the vault had maps. The fleet assembled in the ghost light of a dying blue star. 43 ships of every shape and age, retrofitted human war cruisers, Thariks stealth corvettes, Skaran swarm carriers, Vexari living ships that pulsed like heartbeats. At their center, Ravager's wake, reborn with vault-forged hull plating, and a propulsion system that bent space like paper. Leah Stroud stood before the gathered captains, no longer just human, no longer just survivor. She was the Fireborn general now. "Today," she said, her voice transmitted in dozens of languages across the fleet, "we reach the beating heart of the thing that thought it could erase us. We tear open its lungs. We break its memory." She paused. "And we make sure no empire ever forgets what happens when you push us too far." The jump to the core wasn't simple. They used stolen Dominion beacon chains, ancient vault algorithms, and Trell's increasingly inhuman link to the Ravager's AI. It still almost killed them. The stars warped. Time unraveled. For moments that stretched into eternities, the fleet existed in 6 places at once. Then reality snapped into place, and the Dominion core was before them. They had arrived at Zareth Prime, the Dominion's capital world, a vast ringworld stretched around a white dwarf sun, bristling with defense towers, dreadnought docks, and orbital bastions that could tear moons apart. The Fury-born had a fleet, Zareth had armies, and still Leah gave the order. "Advance." The first strike came from a Fury-born prototype, the Ash Singer, a Thariks-designed stealth frigate equipped with Void Rift torpedoes. It pierced the core's gravity shell and detonated in the primary docking ring, setting off a chain reaction that tore open half a city. The Dominion didn't panic. They retaliated. Thousands of defense drones launched, each with tactical AIs. Trained on centuries of warfare, interceptor missiles filled the void. Plasma lances arced like lightning across the dark. The Fury-born charged into hell. Makar led the ground assault, landing in the agricultural arcologies that fed billions. With him were the newly liberated Umbari stormtroopers, silent warriors, who moved like shadows and struck like plasma storms. They didn't take prisoners. Not today. Not after what they'd seen in the vault. Trell remained aboard Ravager's wake, interfacing directly with the Dominion's core network. "I can corrupt their command systems," he said, voice hollow. "But the vault's language, it's speaking through me. We may not control what happens next." "Do it anyway," Leah ordered. Trell reached into the Dominion's neural net, and it screamed. Orbital batteries misfired. Fleet logistics collapsed. Sorak dreadnoughts turned on each other. The Dominion was choking on its own power. Inside Zareth's throne spire, Verulthas watched his empire unravel in real time. "These creatures were meant to perish," he snarled. "They were a lesson, not a threat." A junior tactician turned, to him trembling. They've surpassed us, adapted. They've become something else. No, Verolthas said coldly. They've become what we feared they might. He activated the final failsafe, Protocol Omega. All Dominion forces were ordered to withdraw to Zereth's final ring. The core would burn with them, if necessary. Leah stood aboard the bridge as enemy fleets began their final consolidation. They're digging in, Makar said. Last stand. Leah clenched her fist. Then let's finish it. The Furyborn fleet reformed. Massive siege platforms powered up, built from vault schematics. The Vexari unleashed planet-breaker spores across defensive zones. Furyborn AI viruses shattered the Dominion's backup command codes. The ring world cracked. The core bled, and, as Zereth's great dome of flame rose over the ruined skyline, Trell whispered something through the bridge speakers. It's awake now. The thing they buried. And it remembers who broke it. The Furyborn had breached the Dominion's most sacred space, but in doing so, they had awakened something older than conquest, something buried for good reason. The final reckoning was near. Zereth, prime burned. Its great ringworld structure fractured, torn from within by Furyborn siege drills, orbital barrages, and the virus-born chaos of Trell's vault-driven infiltration. Dominion fleets crumbled in the sky. Their oldest fortresses fell inward, cannibalizing themselves as weapon systems malfunctioned and AI protocols rebelled. It wasn't just a defeat. It was implosion, the collapse of an empire's soul. But even as the Furyborn prepared to deliver the final blow, something shifted. Trell staggered back from the Ravager's control core, smoke rising from his skin, his eyes now pitch black and flickering with ghostly glyphs. The vault is not just a repository, he gasped. It's a prison, a tomb. And we opened it. Leah turned from the window. What did we free? A mind, Trell whispered. One older than the Dominion. One they feared so much they shattered galaxies to hide it. Across the battlefield, Sorek and Furyborn alike began to receive the same signal, broadcast in pure emotion. Rage, betrayal, a hunger to reclaim what was lost. Zereth's crust split open. From its core emerged the Idolarch, a being of shifting. Voidstone wrapped in dark energy, vast enough to eclipse cities. It floated above the ruins like a god reborn. Trell fell to his knees. It remembers who locked it away, and now it sees us as the same. Leah stared, stunned. It's not on our side. It's on no one's side. The Idolarch unleashed, a pulse of raw entropy. Dominion cruisers vaporized. Furyborn fighters froze mid-flight and shattered into dust. The Ravager's wake trembled as vault-forged armor strained against the weight of time itself. This isn't war anymore, Makari growled, gripping a bulkhead. It's annihilation. Leah acted fast. She ordered a full fleet withdrawal, but the Idolarch bent space, trapping them in a loop of collapsing realities. Escape was impossible. Unless... Trell, she said, you're still linked to the vault, right? Barely, he said, eyes bloodshot. It's fighting me. Can we put it back? Seal it again? He hesitated. Only if something stays behind to hold the lock. Leah met his eyes. A long silence stretched between them. Then she nodded. The Furyborn regrouped for one final push, not to destroy, but to contain. Vault-powered drives surged. Swarm fighters sacrificed themselves to create gaps in the Idolarch's influence. Vexari spores latched onto its form, disrupting its cohesion. Makar led the assault, carving a path through gravity rifts and unraveling physics. Leah and Trell reached the heart of the Idolarch's projection chamber, where it had once been, bound. As Trell reconnected to the vault's central core, Leah transferred command to Makar. If this works, she said, you'll be in charge. He stared at her, jaw tight. This is suicide. No, she said, smiling faintly. It's justice. The final sequence began. Trell used his last strength to reroute the Idolarch's power into the vault's own containment field. Leah stood at the focal point, directing energy flows, locking each algorithm into place with her own mind. The Idolarch shrieked, not in sound, but in cosmic agony, as it was dragged back into its prison. Leah looked up as space collapsed around her, and she smiled. A blinding flash tore through Zereth Prime. Then silence. Days later, the Furyborn fleet regrouped at a neutral system, battered, bloodied, victorious. The Dominion was no more. Its leaders dead or in hiding, its fleet shattered, its control broken. Systems once enslaved rose under their own banners. The age of empires had ended, and at the heart of the new galactic map was Drifthold, a station once hidden, now the capital of a new alliance, one born not from conquest, but from vengeance, memory, and survival. Makar stood before the newly formed Coalition Council. He bore scars of the battle and a new title, Warden General of the Free Stars. She died for all of us, he said quietly, raising a glass to Leah's memory. But she didn't want statues. She wanted action. The room stood as one. Trell survived, changed forever. Now part machine, part mind, he became guardian of the vault, ensuring nothing inside would ever awaken again. Yet sometimes he'd wander the halls alone, speaking softly as though to someone unseen. And occasionally, just briefly, the glyphs glowed in response. The stars were quiet now, but the galaxy would. Remember that once humanity was meant to be defeated, and instead we burned an empire to ash.